Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy Podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I am your host, and in this episode, we are going to be recapping, going over everything that's been happening in 2025 free agency in the NFL. I'm recording this on March 14th, 2025. There really isn't a good time to record this episode because, you know, if you record it too early, players get signed after you release the episode, which will happen. There are a number of key free agents still available as of this recording. And even by the time I post this, people might have been signed. But a lot of big moves have been made in the NFL. So I kind of want to go over all the transactions that have been made in terms of free agent signings, as well as go over some of the trades that have led us to where this NFL landscape is looking right now. But before we do any of that, before we talk ball, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you are enjoying the podcast. And if you do want the YouTube version to see my delicious face, head over to the Fantasy Football Prodigy over on YouTube. Now, before we get into the free agent signings, we're going to quickly go over kind of the biggest trades of the offseason. We're going to start with DK Metcalf, wide receiver of the Seahawks. He got traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a 2025 second-round pick. And in addition to that, DK Metcalf agreed to a 5-year, $150 million extension. So, obviously, you know, for DK Metcalf, it's a big change of scenery. But last year, it really wasn't a great year for fantasy for Metcalf. The emergence of JSN really kind of hindered DK Metcalf's alpha status on that team. And honestly, I don't love the move for fantasy. Whoever ends up being the quarterback for the Steelers, obviously, you know, having DK Metcalf is better than not having DK Metcalf. But right now, the quarterbacks on the roster are Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson. So I'm assuming they're going to sign someone and bring them in. But George Pickens is still there as kind of a downfield threat, and both of these guys kind of do similar things downfield. They can make big plays, so it'll be interesting to see how that works. But I do think this kind of nerfs both the upside for Metcalf and Pickens. They'll each obviously have their weeks because they're both tremendously talented players that can make big plays. But I think this is more of a move that helps the team and helps the offense more so than helps the individual players for fantasy, other than obviously, you know, whoever is throwing them the ball. But at this point, is whoever they sign at quarterback, are they going to be relevant? We'll see. Another big wide receiver trade, Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers was traded to the Washington Commanders in exchange for a 5th-round pick. I see what Washington is doing, and to give up just a 5th-round pick for that type of player, I mean, I feel like it's an okay move for them and for the team, kind of similar to the DK Metcalf trade, although that contract is very huge for DK Metcalf. But in terms of the individual players involved in this trade, you know, it obviously helps Jaden Daniels. He has another weapon to throw the ball to, but Terry McLaurin is no longer going to be the alpha there. I should rephrase that. He is still the best receiver on the team, but he's not going to be clear and far away the number one. Deebo Samuel is a better player than any number 2 option they had on the team in 2024. I think McLaurin is the better of the 2 pure receivers. And who knows? It might be a thing where, you know, it's always hard to know. Is it better to be the true, unquestioned number 1 receiver, or is it better to have a solid number 2 that can actually take attention away and make it easier for the number 1 to do their job? All in all, it'll be tough for Terry McLaurin to duplicate his fantasy production from last season overall. With his 13 touchdowns that he scored last season, that's just a tough number for anyone to duplicate. If he's able to do that, you know, he'll be amazing for fantasy, but we'll see where his ADP ends up come draft time. But this move with Deebo Samuel, I think it helps the offense, gives him another playmaker, gives Daniels another playmaker to throw the ball to. But Deebo Samuel's production has been falling the last few years, and he is not really a true wide receiver. He's almost a running back in a wide receiver's body, where he's kind of a catch and run guy. He'll get handoffs, he'll get carries, close to the line of scrimmage targets, which, that doesn't, Terry McLaurin is more of a downfield type of receiver. So maybe they will coexist really well there. But there's a reason that he went for a 5th round pick, and it is possible that, maybe he has a little bit of a resurgence here depending on his usage, but he was in that 49ers offense. He got opportunities last year. It was a good situation for him, and the production just hasn't been there. It's been falling, year after year, and now he's, getting older. He is currently 29 years old, just turned 29 in January. And for, a true receiver, that might not necessarily be old, but like I said, he kind of plays the receiving position like a running back, where he really does rely on his running ability, run after the catch. And kind of like with running backs at this age, that does start to go more often than not. So long story short, it's an okay move for the team. I don't know if Deebo is really going to be super fantasy relevant. Kind of like Metcalf, he'll have good weeks. He is a talented player, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And then just staying with the same Commanders team, Laramie Tunsil, star left tackle, traded from the Houston Texans to the Washington Commanders. We'll start with what the Commanders gave up. So they gave up so they sent 2 picks in 2025, a 3rd and a 7th round pick, and then 2 picks in 2026, a 2nd and a 4th. So they're giving up quite a bit for a left tackle. Granted, he's a very good left tackle. He does have his false start issues that I've been hearing so many people tweet about, but he is a talented player. It's just the type of thing where I don't think the Houston Texans want to pay him long term. He has 2 years remaining on a 3-year, $75 million deal. He's going to require an extension soon. And Washington made this move because, they're with that rookie quarterback contract that Jaden Daniels has. They're going all in to, capitalize on this Super Bowl window, because when your star quarterback is on a rookie contract, it really does open the door for a lot of big free agent signings. Obviously, this doesn't help CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans in the short term in terms of pass protection, but Washington has a nice left tackle there that'll help Jaden Daniels be even better. And the Commanders are a scary team. I mean, they were in a pretty close game with the Eagles. I know the final score wasn't super close, but in the playoffs, Washington was very competitive with Philadelphia for most of that playoff game, and then the Eagles went on to blow out the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So that's almost a testament to how good the Washington team really is to compete with the Eagles for as long as they did and as well as they did, who then went on to kind of dismantle the dynasty Chiefs. So in other receiver news, back to wide receivers, speaking of the Houston Texans, nice little segues here. Christian Kirk traded to the Houston Texans for a 7th round pick, a 2026 7th round pick. So basically nothing. I think they were going to cut him. Yeah, they were planning on releasing Christian Kirk. I don't, is it a huge flashy move? No, but would I be surprised if Christian Kirk has fantasy relevant games? No, I would not be surprised. The team also released Evan Ingram, which we'll talk about. Well, he isn't signed as of this recording, I don't think. So I have my little tracker here. I didn't see him on there, but actually, wait a minute. He might be signed. I think he might be signed. Not to completely dismantle the. Okay, he did officially sign. My bad. He did. I know he was talking with the Denver Broncos, but Evan Ingram is with the Denver Broncos, former tight end of the Jags, who got released. We'll talk about him later when we get to that segment. But the Jacksonville Jags are kind of clearing house a little bit. Brian Thomas Jr. at wide receiver is the clear future of that receiving room. It's a little interesting that they're taking away weapons from Trevor Lawrence, who, ultimately needs weapons. He's not a premier star quarterback at this point. So right now their depth chart is Brian Thomas Jr. That's great. But then it's Gabe Davis, Diami Brown, who they signed, and then Parker Washington, Brennan Strange at tight end. So it'll be interesting to see if they bring in anyone else. I don't even know what they have for draft picks. And this is supposedly not a big receiver draft. It's a very running back heavy draft. It's showing me last year's draft picks. Hey, Google. I kind of want to see the upcoming ones. It should just know what I want. Okay, it's currently playing a video. Hey, internet. Here we go. So the Jacksonville Jags, they have the 5th overall pick, the 36th overall pick. They have 2 third-round picks, 2 fourth-round picks, and a 5th, 2 6th, and a 7th. So they'll probably bring in some sort of pass catcher, but yeah, Christian Kirk in that Houston Texans offense might be relevant. Obviously, that offense disappointed, and I don't think Christian Kirk is a superstar, but he could definitely have PPR value. Nico Collins is the number 1 there. Tank Dell is probably going to miss the season with that devastating knee injury. And then Stephon Diggs is currently a free agent as well. So Kirk will have the opportunity to get targets for the Texans. And then some big quarterback news. The Raiders traded for Geno Smith, quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks, former quarterback of the Seahawks, I should say. Vegas gave up a 2025 third-round pick. So this does help the Raiders in the short term, I believe. Brock Bowers put up huge numbers with Aiden O'Connell and who was it? Gardner Minshew, I think, was throwing the ball for the Raiders at some points. And he had a historically great rookie season. You obviously have Jacoby Myers as well at wide receiver, who is going to benefit from this, I think. Geno Smith, he did get traded for a third, and based on, not to spoil the free agency signing, but the Seahawks then went ahead and signed Sam Darnold. To me, those players are kind of comparable. I think Geno Smith is, at this point, he's proven over a few seasons that he's a solid, accurate quarterback, whereas, Sam Darnold had one really good season with my Vikings, but it was a perfect season in the situation around him, where, in terms of the Seattle quarterback play, it might be about the same to worse, but for the Raiders to go from Minshew and Aiden O'Connell to Geno Smith, that is a huge upgrade. That running back room is pretty decimated as of now. They just signed Raheem Mostert, and I think Zamir White is still on the roster, but other than that, it's pretty dire. So I could definitely see them bringing in a rookie running back, but just to focus on that Geno Smith trade, Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers definitely benefit a lot from that. Behind Jacoby Myers, there's really not a ton of options in that receiver room. Trey Tucker is really the only other one of note. He's kind of a field stretching deep threat guy, and I'm looking at their depth charts. Guys I've never heard of: Raymond Keaton, Christian Wilkerson, Tyreek McAllister, Alex Bachman, Kyle Phillips. Is that the Kyle Phillips that used to play for the Texans? Wow, they got him all the way down there on the depth chart, huh? I feel like he's done more than some of these other guys. He should be at least 5th, huh? Wow, disrespecting Kyle Phillips. That's crazy. There was a moment in time, I think in one of my dynasty leagues, he got traded for like a 2nd round pick. Not by me, but I think that did happen. So he had a little buzz at one point. And then the other like notable fantasy relevant trade that probably won't be relevant. The Browns traded for Kenny Pickett from the Eagles. In exchange, they gave the Eagles a 2025 5th round pick and quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So as of now, Kenny Pickett and Deshaun Watson are the only quarterbacks on the roster for the Browns. And Deshaun Watson is probably not going to play, from my understanding. He had that Achilles injury, so I doubt. And he's also just like not good. So they're going to have to sign someone or draft someone. Maybe. If they go in with Kenny Pickett, that's going to be something to watch. But we'll see. But yeah, those are kind of the big trades that I wanted to get out of the way and cover before we get into the actual free agency signings. If I missed anything, you can comment down below. If you can comment wherever you're enjoying the podcast. But we're kind of going to go team by team, have a little tracker here. It goes division by division. So we're going to start with the AFC East and talk about our free agency signings and just overall contract signings, because there are extensions as well. For example, Josh Allen, starting with the Buffalo Bills here, he agreed to a 6-year contract extension, or a new 6-year deal worth $330 million, $250 million of that guaranteed. So needless to say, Josh Allen is a wealthy man. I don't think this is really a surprise. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, just won MVP. And, you know, these quarterbacks are going to get signed at some point. They're going to get extended. So it makes sense for these teams to do it now versus later, because cap-wise, the longer you wait, the more that player is going to get paid down the road annually. So, yeah, he's going to be with the Bills for a long, long time. And this is all happening despite him having 4 years remaining on his current contract. So they are all in on Josh Allen. Don't need to spend much more time on that. I mean, it is surprising that they gave him the contract, I mean, this early, I guess, with what he had remaining on his contract, I guess you could say. But it also does make sense just financially, where, you know, if you were to wait till the end of the contract, when you do add those years on, it's going to be even more. But in terms of other big signings for the Bills, Ty Johnson, it might not sound like a big deal, but he signed a 2-year, $5 million deal. And that is big news because the Buffalo Bills do have a bit of a running back by committee. Obviously, James Cook is the leader of that committee, but Ray Davis and Ty Johnson were both very involved. And I'm honestly, I don't want to say I'm out on James Cook, but James Cook had 16 touchdowns, I think it was. I can verify that, but I believe he had 16 rushing touchdowns a year after, you know, coming off of multiple years of, I think, 2 rushing touchdowns. That was kind of the knock on James Cook, was he didn't score a lot of touchdowns. Then, you know, this year he gets in the end zone a lot, but that stat is very hard to duplicate, especially when you do have a running back by committee approach. You have Josh Allen, who can run it in himself. And the cool part about all this, as I'm trying to stall, is my internet won't load the James Cook stats, and that's fine. If I'm wrong, you can flame me in the comments, but I believe those are his touchdown totals. Oh, now it pulls up. I have fiber internet, by the way. I pay for fiber internet. Can't even look up a stat. So yeah, 2 and 16 rushing touchdowns. Receiving wise, he had 2 in 2024, 4 in 2023, and 1 in 2022. So the numbers I initially gave were just his rushing touchdowns. But I digress. James Cook is a great player, but his usage, his touchdown dependency last year, I could see things maybe not working out perfectly as they did last year. He's still going to be a fine player with big games on a good offense, but he's someone I could see being overdrafted and maybe someone you trade high in Dynasty, because I have him on my Dynasty team and I'm thinking maybe I ship him off. Not that, you know, I want to. I'm a big Dalvin Cook fan too, Vikings skull. But other than that, Khalil Shakir at wide receiver signed a 4-year extension worth up to $60 million, $32 million guaranteed. Just a solid underneath PPR type of guy for Josh Allen. He had a pretty okay year. He was relevant at times, but not a superstar in terms of fantasy production. But he had a really solid year. He played 15 games, saw 100 targets, finished with 821 yards and 4 touchdowns. So someone that, you know, probably not gonna be drafted very high, but you might end up starting off the waiver wire next season. They also added Josh Palmer in free agency, signed a 3-year, $36 million contract. This doesn't super excite me. And right now, the Buffalo Bills receiving room, it's kind of just crowded. Like, kind of similar to last year. I think it's going to be kind of the same thing, where there's going to be guys that have good games, but you're never going to know who to start. They got Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman. They bring in Josh Palmer. Amari Cooper isn't there as of now. He's still a free agent as of this recording. Curtis Samuel, Laviska Shenault. No one's super inspiring where it's like, you know, oh, I'm going to start this guy every week, unless Keon Coleman can really level up after a pretty disappointing rookie season. But I think all of these guys are going to kind of combine to hopefully support Josh Allen. You got Dawson Knox at tight end. Oh, sorry. They have Dawson Knox as a starter on the depth chart. he might be the better player overall. But Dalton Kincaid is the bigger receiving threat, barely after last season. But he's gonna have to step up too if he wants to make his name in fantasy. So, yeah, we'll see. It's kind of a bunch of guys that might not be super relevant. And even if they are, you're not going to know when to start them. You're not going to know whose week it is. So we'll see how that plays out, if they bring anyone else in the drafts, or there's still some free agents out there, but we'll see. They signed Joey Bosa, edge rusher, $12.6 million deal. He was a free agent. So, this is more of a fantasy football show. So I don't really want to spend too much time on defense, but he did get released by the Chargers, so he was a free agent. He landed with the Bills, and that's kind of all I want to spend on Buffalo there. Moving on to the Dolphins, no really big moves. They signed Zach Wilson to a 1-year deal, Alexander Mattison to a 1-year deal. Nick Westbrook-Akine signed a 2-year, $6.5 million deal, 3.2 guaranteed. He was the guy for the Titans who scored a bunch of touchdowns on not a ton of targets. He had a stretch where he was just scoring every single week. I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant. Obviously, you have Tyreek Hill, even though he kind of looked like he slowed down a little bit. But I have Hill in Dynasty, so I hope it was just a off year. But when you have a year like that at his age, it's weird to see him bounce back. But Tyreek Hill, hopefully he can have a good year. But Jalen Waddle is already there. Malik Washington was a rookie last year. That's kind of exciting. So Westbrook-Akine could slot in as the 3 if he could beat out Washington, but it's probably not going to be super relevant. Alexander Mattison is kind of in there as depth. Mostert is off the team. He's on the Raiders now, so it's Achane and Jalen Wright in that running back room. Jalen Wright they drafted last year, and it was kind of disappointing. Didn't really do too much, so maybe Madison beats him out for the number 2 role, but we'll see about that. And yeah, those are kind of like the big fantasy relevant signings. Moving on to the Patriots in that division, Josh Dobbs agreed to a 2-year, $8 million deal, quarterback. He's a mobile guy, but he's definitely going in there to be the backup to Drake May. He flashed at times with the Vikings, but then he definitely kind of fluttered, kind of burnt out after a little while. After a couple of games, the league figured him out and his mobility. Matt Collins from the Bills signed a 2-year, $8.4 million deal with the Patriots. Right now, the Patriots aren't a place where you really want your fantasy receivers to be playing. Obviously, Drake May could level up. I mean, I'm not saying like Drake May showed anything but promise. Like with what was around him, he was impressive. But I don't think this team wants to air it out, even if Drake May is like a very high quality, high caliber quarterback. I think they want to play defense and run the ball. But Mario Douglas, Kayshon Boutte, Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, like Matt Collins could fit in there and have a role. But I just don't think it's going to be super fantasy relevant. Austin Hooper, tight end, re-signed a 1-year, $5 million deal. $4 million guaranteed. Max value of $7 million. Must be some incentives in there. They signed Milton Williams on the D-line, 4-year, $104 million deal, $51 million guaranteed. That's a big defensive signing, so I'll give it a shout. I'll give it a shout out. Signed Carlton Davis, cornerback, 3-year, $60 million deal. But we're here to focus on offense, and that's what we're going to talk about here with the Jets. Really, there's only one key offensive signing here, and that's Kene Nwangwu. Skull. No, I'm kidding. But he did get signed a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. But Justin Fields at quarterback signed a 2-year, $40 million deal with the Jets, $30 million guaranteed. This is exciting for Justin Fields as a player himself. Justin Fields' mobility is going to make him relevant for fantasy football. That's just kind of how the game works. He runs the ball. He's going to be probably a low-end quarterback 1 at worst, even if things go really poorly for him. If he plays really, really poorly, Tyrod Taylor is there as a backup and he could take over, but I do think this team wants Justin Fields to play well. I do think this hurts Breece Hall, and I am a little nervous about Breece Hall at this point in time. He was definitely disappointing last season, And one of the things that has kind of helped out his lackluster overall production is his passing game involvement, and bringing in a mobile quarterback like Justin Fields. A mobile quarterback might be more apt to take off and run versus checking it down to the running back. They also have Braylon Allen in the backfield, who's going to get touches. He's a very good player in his own right, as well as Isaiah Davis. Like, they have 3 solid running backs in that room. And don't get me wrong, Breece Hall, he's the guy to have there in the running back room, but it's a little dicey. It is a little bit dicey. Other than that, Davante Adams is no longer on the team. So Garrett Wilson is the clear number 1. You got Alan Lazard, Xavier Gibson, Malachi Corley. So obviously Justin Fields isn't a guy where you look at him and say, oh, thank goodness my receiver has, Justin Fields at quarterback. But what I will say is, if Justin Fields hyper targets Garrett Wilson and they don't bring anyone else in, I could see Garrett Wilson being okay for fantasy. All comes down to his ADP. And Justin Fields, obviously, he's not the best pure passer, but if it's a type of situation where he's thrown it to Garrett Wilson and pretty much no one else, I could see it working out. They signed Stone Smart? Really? I only noticed that because I have Stone Smart on my dynasty team. Why? Hold on. I have this free agency tracker. Did he get traded? No, he got signed. I have this free agency tracker, and Stone Smart isn't even on the tracker. What is that? He's notable enough to put that. I think they put every player on there. What else is this tracker not telling me? If I miss anyone, I apologize. Blame the tracker. I have another one pulled up here. Is he on this one? Okay, so I have a second tracker, a backup tracker pulled up. Stone Smart, 1-year deal. I got to be careful here. Anyways, moving on to the AFC North. Baltimore Ravens, not a ton of moves. They re-signed fullback Patrick Ricard, offensive tackle Ronnie Stanley, 3-year, $60 million deal to protect Lamar Jackson, and then DeAndre Hopkins, Hall of Fame wide receiver that is a little bit washed. 1-year, $5 million contract with the Ravens. I have him in my dynasty league. I drafted him in our startup league, and I finally was able to win him a championship in 2024. The Chiefs almost won him one in real life, but they couldn't quite do it. But this move does not excite me for fantasy. If there's someone in your dynasty league that thinks this is going to work out well for Hopkins, maybe capitalize on that and trade him for what you can. But he's 32, and it's not to say he's not still a capable receiver. He's just not the player he once was, and there's already options there. This offense runs through Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson on the ground. When Lamar Jackson airs it out, which he obviously had a great passing season last year, those targets are going to Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews. So Hopkins is going to be probably the 4th best option at best. I mean, he'll score a touchdown here and there, I'm sure. Kind of like he did with the Chiefs when he signed with them last year. He had his games occasionally where he was startable, but I don't think he's not going to be hyper targeted. This team is going to run the ball and try to efficiently pass the ball off the running game when they can. They're going to throw to Flowers. They're going to throw to Bateman. So maybe if an injury pops up, maybe you can make a case he'll be relevant, but he very few games last season where you were happy you started Hopkins, and he still showed that he has some talent left. Like, I don't think he needs to retire or anything, but you're not going to get vintage Hopkins production in this situation. For the Bengals, the big news there was T. Higgins received the non-exclusive franchise tag for the 2nd straight year. That would give him $26.2 million for the 2025 season, but they are trying to work out a long-term deal. Thank goodness, though, they worked out a deal with their true superstar, tight end Mike Gesicki. He's coming back. He re-signed on a 3-year deal worth $25.5 million. And he was actually in 12 of that coming in year 1, according to the notes here. But he was actually somewhat relevant as a streamer last year, especially when T. Higgins missed games. Mike Gesicki was someone you could stream. Week 2, he was the tight end 5 on the week. He was a tight end 1 overall in week 9 with 5 for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on 24.5 fantasy points and half PPR. 10 targets or 10 catches for 86 yards in week 17 in the championship, tight end 8. So if the targets are there, he is someone that is going to be stream worthy. If Higgins or Chase misses time, he's someone to pick up. Probably not someone you want to draft and play right away unless you go like super late tight end or if you're in a really deep league. But other than that, Samaje Perine is back in town at running back. He signed a 2-year deal worth up to $3.8 million. That's not super relevant. There was a time when Perine was a nice little third down back, but I think that time is gone. Chase Brown is the lead back there. Zach Moss is, I believe it says he's still on the roster. And then I would not be surprised if the Bengals do draft someone, just because it's such a deep running back class. Although Zach Moss had a weird injury, like he had a neck injury, didn't he? So hopefully he's okay for the season. I'm not sure what the status is of that, but yeah, long story short, spent way too much time on Samaje Perine. Tanner Hudson at tight end is also back on a 1-year deal. So those are the main Bengals notes there. For the Browns, like I said, they acquired Kenny Pickett in a trade with the Eagles for a late pick and DTR. Not a really fantasy relevant trade, but it's a huge defensive trade. So Myles Garrett, all he cares about is winning. He doesn't care about the money. So he re-signed with the Cleveland Browns. 4-year extension that includes a $123 million guarantee, average salary of $40 million a year. This deal ties him to the Browns for the next 6 years. Also includes a no trade clause. I actually missed that part before. Okay, wow. So again, this transaction was all about winning, not about the money. Yeah, the Browns really haven't made any moves. They signed offensive tackle Cornelius Lucas. So yeah, for the Steelers, Mason Rudolph coming back. A lot of retreads here. Mason Rudolph at quarterback, he used to play for the Steelers. He went away, but they missed him. Not a good quarterback really, but he signed a 2-year, $8 million deal. Wow, that's really low, even for a backup, I feel like. But you hope that he is the backup. Because if he's not, that's going to be terrible for Metcalf and Pickens. But again, I said it earlier, it's Rudolph and Skylar Thompson. So please bring someone else in. They traded for Metcalf like we talked about. Ben Skowronek, he signed with the Steelers. Not super relevant. Donald Parham signed a 1-year deal with the Steelers. And then moving on to the AFC South, we'll start with the Houston Texans. They traded for Christian Kirk, which is, again, it's going to be relevant with Stephon Diggs not on the team right now, and Tank Dell, in line to miss the whole season with that injury that he suffered at the end of 2024. It's pretty much only Nico Collins there. So Christian Kirk will probably be the 2 there. And then Daria Gumbawale re-signed on a 1-year, $2 million deal. Not very relevant, but there's been times where you can spot start him in a deep league with PPR production. They also signed Justin Watson, wide receiver. They traded for Ed Ingram, offensive guard for my Vikings, for a 6th round pick. We'll take that. And yeah, those are kind of the main moves there for the Texans. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts, quarterback Daniel Jones signed a 1-year, $14 million deal. Left the New York Giants, signed with the Vikings as a backup, and he opted to sign with the Colts. I think he made this decision because Anthony Richardson, the young, hopefully potential future of the Indianapolis Colts franchise at quarterback, has looked very inconsistent to bad in his short career. So Daniel Jones is there to compete with AR. It's Anthony Richardson, not Aaron Rodgers, just to clarify. And yeah, I think we see Daniel Jones start games this year, unless Richardson has he takes a big step forward. Richardson has a lot of physical traits, but it just hasn't worked at the quarterback position in the NFL in terms of consistency and accuracy. You know, he can throw a nice deep ball every once in a while and he can run, but you know, you have to complete more than half your passes to make it in the NFL. So other than that, they signed Khalil Herbert at running back to a 1-year deal, and they re-signed wide receiver Ashton Dulin to a 2-year deal worth up to $8.5 million. They also stole Cam Bynum from us at safety, 4-year, $60 million contract. He will be missed. For the Jacksonville Jags, they bring in quarterback Nick Mullins to be the backup to Trevor Lawrence on a 2-year, $6.5 million deal. They signed Diami Brown to a 1-year, $10 million contract. That's interesting. That seems like a lot of money for a guy who really didn't do much on a really good Washington offense last year with really no target competition outside of Terry McLaurin. It's just interesting. You know, you get rid of Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. You bring in Diami Brown. You got Gabe Davis there, another guy who like hasn't really met expectations, kind of disappointed when giving the opportunity. So if they don't bring someone else in, I mean, it's going to be Brian Thomas Jr. and no one else. They signed tight end Hunter Long, 2-year, $5 million deal. They signed Johnny Munt, former Viking. He will be missed. Yeah, those are the main fantasy relevant signings there. I'm not spending too much time on like linemen and defense and stuff. So just because I'm trying to kind of keep this as short as possible without dragging on too long, just touching on the fantasy relevant stuff here. So for the Titans, Van Jefferson signed a 1-year deal worth a max of $2.5 million. That's such a small contract. I mean, NFL wise, obviously, I'll take a 1-year, $2.5 million contract anytime. I know I said I wasn't gonna talk about linemen, but this is a big contract. Offensive tackle Dan Moore Jr., 4-year, $82 million deal, $50 million guaranteed. So that's a big offensive lineman signing there. But the Titans, I don't know, man. They don't look like a team that's gonna be super fantasy viable. We'll see what they do at quarterback, but right now it's Will Levis, and they also signed Brandon Allen to be a backup on a 1-year deal. Pollard will have his weeks. Calvin Ridley is there. Chig Okonkwo might be a streamer at tight end, but as of now, that offense doesn't like look super, inspiring, but you never know. Things happen all the time that are weird. Moving on to the AFC West, the Denver Broncos re-signed Jarrett Stidham, 2-year, $12 million contract to back up Bo Nix, who had a phenomenal rookie year. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but Evan Ingram got released by Jacksonville, signed a 2-year, $23 million deal with the Broncos. In terms of landing spot, it could be better, it could be worse. But as long as Bo Nix doesn't take a big step back after his rookie year, I do like the quarterback situation there. Sean Payton, as the head coach and offensive mastermind there, is going to try to get the ball to his weapons. And, Cortland Sutton had a career resurgence, and I believe he was 28, 29 years old last year, and he had his best year ever. 1,081 yards, 8 touchdowns. He was a super valuable player on my dynasty team where I didn't know what to do with him. I couldn't trade him for anything, but he wasn't really helping me. But then Bo Nix and Sean Payton got together, and that offense actually clicked. They do not have Javonte Williams at running back anymore, so they're probably going to bring someone in front of Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, Tyler Beatty. But with Evan Ingram, it's Cortland Sutton, and then after him, it's a kind of trio of guys who made plays at times but weren't really established players. You got Marvin Mims Jr., Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, Trent Sherfield, and A.T. Perry are there. But Evan Ingram could definitely be the number 2 in this offense behind Sutton if they don't bring anyone else in. And honestly, target-wise, Ingram could outpace Sutton depending on how they run the offense. If Sutton is more of a downfield guy, which that's kind of his game, and they pepper Ingram with targets down low, it might work out for Ingram, but we'll see. And then for the Chiefs, they re-signed Kareem Hunt, 1-year deal, $1.5 million. They signed Elijah Mitchell to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. So Kareem Hunt, a very good running back who's getting older, gets a $1.5 million deal, but played a part in getting them to the Super Bowl and is a, he's not the same player, but he's a grinder. He can get in the end zone. But then Elijah Mitchell, who can't even stay healthy, he gets a $2.5 million deal. Okay, interesting. They also bring in Gardner Minshew and Bailey Zappi on 1-year deals. So honestly, that backup quarterback room behind Mahomes is pretty lethal. They re-signed Marquise Hollywood Brown, 1-year deal worth up to $11 million. They signed offensive tackle Jalen Moore, 2-year, $30 million deal. Guard Trey Smith signed the non-exclusive franchise tag. He'll get it paid $23.4 million. They do still hope to get a long-term deal done. Those are kind of the main fantasy relevant pieces there. And then for the Raiders, like I talked about earlier, they got Geno Smith at quarterback, so that really helps the offense. It helps Brock Bowers. That helps Jacoby Myers, who has been very relevant at times with bad quarterback play. So I could see him being a very sneaky draft pick. And I might send out some dynasty feelers for Jacoby Myers, because I don't think anyone really wants him, but we'll see. Raheem Mostert signed there. He was super relevant 2 years ago, where he had like 20 plus touchdowns for the Dolphins. I was all about him at his ADP last year, and he just dealt with injuries. And when he was healthy, he wasn't really given a ton of work. So he was very disappointing, and his career seems to be pretty much over. I'm glad he was able to get another contract, but he's 32. He's played well past the age that most running backs play. So again, that depth chart is pretty weak at the running back position, but I fully expect them to bring someone in, and Mostert will probably compete with Zamir White for backup touches. And if they don't bring anyone in, okay, maybe Raheem Mostert has value, but that's a big, how do they not bring someone in? And especially in this running back draft, like with all these elite prospects, like they have to, right? It's the Raiders though. We'll see. Not fantasy relevant, but Max Crosby's one of the best defensive players in the league, signed a 3-year extension worth $106.5 million, 91.5 guaranteed. And then moving on to the Chargers, the big move there, they signed Najee Harris, former running back of the Steelers, 1-year deal worth $5.25 million. Has a max value of 9.25. Najee Harris hasn't really been explosive and a true difference maker for the Steelers, but he plays every game. He barely gets 1,000 yards every year, and he can get in the end zone. So it's kind of the perfect fit for the Chargers, or for Najee Harris to go to the Chargers. If they don't bring anyone else of note in, I'm going to be in on Najee Harris, just because his ADP is probably going to be lower than it should be. But if they bring back Dobbins, or if they sign one of these many, talented rookies at running back, it's going to muddy the waters a little bit more. And you can tell, his contract's only $5.25 million. I guess it does have a max of 9.25, but it's not big money, and it's a 1-year deal. So the money kind of talks with maybe what the league thinks of him as a player. But right now, behind Harris, it's Kamani Vidal, Hassan Haskins, and Jarrett Patterson. But we'll see how the running back room shakes out. But this team, with Harbaugh as the coach and them wanting to run the ball effectively and score touchdowns, like, would not surprise me if Najee Harris is the lead back. There's a very good chance he gets double-digit touchdowns and finishes as a very relevant, running back 2 or even running back 1 if it works out well enough. J.K. Dobbins looked like a really good player in this offense, and I'm not trying to say he's a bad player, but people with his injuries that he suffered don't do what he did last year. So it's a good situation, but we'll see who else they bring in. They re-signed Jalen Reagor, pretty irrelevant. And this one's kind of interesting. They signed Mike Williams, wide receiver, on a 1-year deal worth up to $6 million. He was on the team before in the past, a couple years ago, and he was very relevant with the Chargers, but then he tore his ACL, I believe was his injury. He was having a pretty dominant 2023, missed the rest of the season, kind of, didn't do much last year at all, really. Played with who did he play with? The Jets, and was it the Steelers? Let me make sure I got that right. But he was pretty irrelevant. I'm not seeing what team he was on. I feel like I shouldn't spend too much time on this, but I feel like it was the Jets and the Steelers. Well, this game log isn't even telling me what team he played for. Yeah, it was. Okay, Jets and Steelers. I'm so smart. I know football. So, you know, you got Mike Williams there, but competing with him, it's Ladd McConkey is kind of an underneath threat. Quentin Johnson is there. Him and Mike Williams kind of do sort of similar things, you know, kind of downfield guys. So I don't know. I don't know how that's going to shake out, but I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Williams went from absolutely nothing in fantasy to, oh, there's Mike Williams. You know, like I think he'll have a couple games this year where it's like, oh, he made a big play. He's on my dynasty team, so hopefully it works out, but we'll see. Those are kind of the big offensive signings there for the Chargers. Moving on to the NFC East here. They signed Miles Sanders. I just saw this. Oh my gosh. Wait a minute. Dude, what are the Cowboys doing? So they signed Javonte Williams, which was already embarrassing enough, which, don't get me wrong, Javonte Williams should be on a team, but it's just so funny that it's the Cowboys. And then they signed Miles Sanders to a 1-year deal. So Miles Sanders, 1-year deal. Javonte Williams, 1 year, $3 million contract. Has a max of $3.5 million though. So, yeah, I mean, you have to imagine they'll bring someone in, but that's what we said last year when they rolled out Rico Dowdle and the corpse of Ezekiel Elliott. So if it is just Javonte Williams, if the offense clicks like it did a couple years ago, he'll be relevant, even though he hasn't really looked like the same player since he's dealt with those big injuries. But I would imagine they draft someone. But I will say, I did have Miles Sanders on my dynasty team, and I did trade him away last year for like nothing. It was a throw-in part of a deal. So it would be perfectly in line with my dynasty team's luck for Miles Sanders to have a career resurgence and have like 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns or something. So we'll see. Yeah, those are the quote big signings on offense. They brought back Kevontae Turpin, 3-year, $18 million deal. More of a return guy than a receiver, but the Giants, they re-signed Tommy DeVito to a 1-year deal. An interesting move, they re-signed wide receiver Darius Slayton, a 3-year deal worth $36 million. There was a time where it seemed like the Giants really didn't want Darius Slayton, but he's stuck around and they just re-signed him to a 3-year deal. I mean, that's a lot of money for Darius Slayton. I mean, I think he's a better player than the average person thinks. And every year he has games where he's very relevant. And right now it's Malik Neighbors, and then behind him it's Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton. So he's, you know, if they bring in someone relevant, okay, maybe Slayton won't be relevant, but he just signed a 3-year, $36 million deal. So you would have to imagine the team wants him to have a role, but you never know. Some teams do weird things, but they also signed Amir Smith-Marset for depth. Those are kind of the big deals there. In terms of fantasy relevant things, the Eagles, they signed a 2-year extension with Saquon Barkley, $41.2 million in new money, 36 guaranteed. They also signed A.J. Dillon to a 1-year deal to be the backup. So, I mean, there goes your, what's his name? Shipley, Will Shipley. There goes your Will Shipley hopes. Although Shipley might beat out A.J. Dillon, especially if Dillon gets hurt. But he'll compete for the backup role, and it'll be irrelevant unless Saquon Barkley gets hurt. Yeah, those are kind of the big moves there. Oh, Harrison Bryant and Kyle Granson at tight end. Can't forget about them. Moving on to Washington Commanders. They re-signed Mariota at quarterback to be the backup. They re-signed McNichols at running back, who was more relevant than Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler managers would have liked, but he was relevant. They traded for Deebo Samuel, so that was kind of their big move, and they obviously traded for Laramie Tunsil, which was big. They re-signed tight end Zach Ertz, 1-year deal, $6.25 million. He's going to be relevant for fantasy, like he is every year. People want to write him off, but he's going to catch passes and have his weeks. Ben Sinnott has more competition. They signed tight end John Bates to a 3-year, $21 million deal. So they drafted rookie tight end Ben Sinnott last year in the 2nd round, I believe, and now it's a crowded tight end room. So we're going to need Zach Ertz to kind of become officially washed for him to not for Sinnott to be relevant. They signed KJ Osborne for depth at receiver. And then moving on to, they did re-sign Bobby Wagner as well to a 1-year deal, $9.5 million. Want to give him a shout out, even though it's not really fantasy relevant, just because I feel like he's like one of the last remaining pieces of like a certain era of football. So it's really cool to see him still playing. But the Bears, not really any like flashy signings, but they're building that offensive line, which I think first and foremost is very important above all else for the Bears. With the amount of sacks that Caleb Williams took last year in his rookie season as the #1 overall pick. And, you know, the Detroit Lions offense with Ben Johnson, their former offensive coordinator, coming over to be the head coach of the Bears. You know, the Lions have a lot of flashy players, but their offensive line is really the core of that team. So I like that Ben Johnson is kind of trying to start in the trenches here as well. They bring in offensive guard Jonah Jackson in a trade with the Rams, 6th round pick. They brought in Joe Tooney in a trade with the Chiefs for a 2026 4th round pick. They signed center Drew Dalman to a 3-year, $42 million contract. So they're trying to fortify the offensive line so that Caleb Williams and DJ Moore can get things going. Keenan Allen is no longer there. He's still a free agent. So Rome Odunze is going to be the clear #2 there, hopefully. So that's very exciting. DeAndre Swift and Roshan Johnson are there at running back. So we'll see. They're a contender to draft somebody. Just because DeAndre Swift really isn't that guy. And then Cole Kmet at tight end, doing what he does. They also re-signed... Oh, excuse me. I got confused because of Ben Johnson. But moving on to Ben Johnson's former team, the Detroit Lions, they signed Kyle Allen at quarterback as a backup depth player. Tim Patrick, wide receiver, 1-year deal worth up to $4 million. He was actually somewhat relevant at times as a #3 target behind Amon-Ra and Jamison Williams. So, nothing too crazy there with the Lions. Their team is pretty set the way it is, and they just need to get healthy because a lot of their players got hurt at various times last year. So if they can stay healthy, they're going to be a contender again. The Packers, nothing too crazy. They signed guard Aaron Banks to a 4-year, $77 million deal. And then for the Vikings, my Minnesota Vikings, a lot of the experts are saying they had the best offseason in the league. It's honestly between them and the Bears. A lot of people have been saying on Twitter, the Twitter experts. But they re-signed Aaron Jones. That's probably the most fantasy relevant thing, in addition to letting Sam Darnold walk and go to the Seahawks, which we'll touch on in a little bit here. But JJ McCarthy is going to be the starter. They re-signed at quarterback. They re-signed Aaron Jones to a 2-year deal, $20 million, $13 million guaranteed. I think this is a okay move. I will say, though, it would not shock me if they invest draft capital in a running back still. I think they can afford to pay this running back contract and bring someone in. Behind Aaron Jones, it's Ty Chandler and someone named Xavier Scott. Xavier with a Z, not an X. So they do need some running back depth, especially Aaron Jones. He's getting older, and he's already a guy that misses games from time to time. He's 30 years old. Turned 30 in December. So it's kind of hard to judge his season because he did have a good year, but there were times where it just didn't seem like we could run the ball super well. So I think it's an okay signing, and I think he'll be hopefully relevant, but he might not be a workhorse, especially if we bring someone else in. If we don't, Aaron Jones is going to be someone worth monitoring in fantasy, but if they bring in like a rookie, especially if they invest early draft capital, it's going to get murky. Big offensive line signings here. We signed Will Fries, 5-year, $88 million deal. I believe he was ranked as the top guard on the market, so that's huge for, you know, basically a rookie with JJ McCarthy. He was a rookie last year, but he missed the whole season apart from some preseason action. Signed center Ryan Kelly to a 2-year, $18 million deal. From what I read about him, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments because I'm not an offensive line expert. I just kind of go off what I've been reading, is that his play has been kind of declining a little bit from what he once was, but he's still an upgrade over kind of what we would have had otherwise at center. So it's all in all a decent signing. And then we signed 2 big defensive tackles, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. Allen got a 3-year, $51 million deal, max of $60 million. And then Hargrave signed a 2-year, $30 million deal, $19 million guaranteed. Byron Murphy, re-signed him at cornerback, 3-year, $54 million contract, max of $66 million. Signed Eric Wilson at linebacker, Isaiah Rodgers and Tavier Thomas at cornerback, Theo Jackson, safety, 2-year, $12 million extension. Harrison Smith coming back for his 14th season, 1-year deal, worth up to $14 million. We re-signed punter Ryan Wright, 1-year, $1.75 million deal. Oh, was I only supposed to talk about fantasy relevant things? Sorry. I'm just excited for this Vikings Super Bowl run. Anyways, moving on to the NFC South. We got Jake Matthews, offensive tackle, signing a 2-year, $45 million extension. That's big news for them. Whoever the quarterback is, it's going to help protect him. Re-signed Kaderil Hodge at wide receiver. Nothing super relevant outside of that. Carolina Panthers, they re-signed Andy Dalton to back up Bryce Young, who looked really good. Andy Dalton came in as a backup and looked pretty good, does what Andy Dalton does and is a quality backup. But then when Bryce Young started again, Bryce Young looked really good. So the plan for them is for Andy Dalton to be the backup. Rico Dowdle had 1,000 rushing yards with the Cowboys, right? I believe he surpassed 1,000. But running back Rico Dowdle signed a 1-year deal with the Carolina Panthers. I want to look up his stats just to verify that. But obviously Chuba Hubbard is there at running back. But they drafted Jonathan Brooks early in last year's draft, and he re-tore his ACL. So he's going to probably miss the season. So they need running back depth. And Rico Dowdle is a solid depth piece. And we saw, I mean, he came in for the Cowboys, and he actually looked pretty decent. You know, he's not like a Todd Gurley level prospect, but he had 1,079 yards, 4.6 a clip. Competed with Zeke for goal line work for some reason. Had 250 receiving yards, so you could do worse. If Chuba goes down, Rico Dowdle is going to be relevant. And we just hope it's not a committee. At least not too much of a committee. But yeah, that was a $6.25 million deal. Tommy Tremble at tight end re-signed a 2-year deal worth up to $16 million. Wow. Includes $8 million guaranteed. And then moving on to the Saints. Juwan Johnson is their biggest offensive signing here. Re-signed on a 3-year, $30.75 million deal. They also re-signed wide receiver Dante Pettis, who was once a very sought-after fantasy asset. I don't know what happened with that. Cam Jordan is coming back in other news for a 15th NFL season. Again, just want to give him a shout-out because he reminds me of an era that reminds me of my youth. Chase Young somehow signed a 3-year, $51 million deal, max value of $57 million. From what I understand, I'm not going to sit here and act like I watch the Saints defensive line a lot, but from my understanding is he didn't play well, and he got that contract. So I know he was a good prospect at one point, but I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. But they also signed safety Justin Reed, 3-year, $31.5 million deal. It's a pretty big defensive signing there. And then for the Bucks, the big news there, wide receiver Chris Godwin is coming back. He was a free agent, and he re-signed on a 3-year, $66 million deal, $44 million guaranteed at signing. At first, I would say, well, he got injured, so maybe, you know, they got him at a discount where it actually helped him stay with the Bucks. But there were, from what I heard, there was at least one other team that offered a lot more money to Godwin, and he chose to stay with Tampa Bay. So I have him in Dynasty. I know I've been talking about my Dynasty team a lot, but I do love that continuity. I love it for Baker and that whole offense. I also had to trade for Mike Evans because I lost Chris Godwin, and there was a rebuilding team with Mike Evans. So I'm like, hey, you know, this might work out. But I have both of them on my team. So hopefully they're both good. Maybe I should try to trade Mike Evans. I don't know. I have no draft picks for like 2 years, so tanking doesn't really make sense. So I'm all in. They re-signed Kyle Trask at quarterback. They re-signed Sterling Shepard at wide receiver, he was a relevant depth piece. They signed They re-signed guard Ben Bredesen, 3-year, $22 million deal. And then on to the NFC West. I think this is the final division because my voice is going, so that is good. They signed Jacoby Brissett, 2-year, $12.5 million contract to back up Kyler Murray. They re-signed Zay Jones on a 1-year deal at wide receiver. He didn't really do much last year. I believe he was injured for quite a bit of that. And then I guess you should probably note they signed Josh Sweat, edge rusher, 4-year, $76.4 million deal. That's a big enough defensive signing. I think it's worth mentioning. They re-signed Baron Browning, 2-year, $15 million deal as an edge rusher. They re-signed guard Evan Brown, 2-year deal, $11.5 million. They re-signed tackle Kelvin Beachum. So got some linemen coming back. For the Rams, they did re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo on a 1-year deal to back up Matt Stafford, but Stafford is coming back. There were rumors that he might leave, but he is coming back. They agreed to a restructured contract. And yeah, that's good for everyone there. That is good for everyone involved. He had permission to talk to other teams, but ultimately decided to stay. Keeping Stafford is huge, but they also brought in Davante Adams, who, look, they lost Cooper Kupp, who we'll talk about in a sec, but Cooper Kupp ended up signing a 3-year, $45 million deal with whatever team he went to. Big surprise, surprise, surprise. We'll get there. And then they signed Davante Adams to a 2-year, $46 million contract. I think a lot of people would say, well, why wouldn't you just keep Cooper Kupp? Cooper Kupp didn't look good at the end of the year. I don't know if it was a thing where the team knew he wasn't a part of the future, so they stopped utilizing him. I just don't buy that because they were a sleeper dark horse contending team. And I know within that building they believed they could win. So I don't think they would just stop utilizing a talent like Cooper Kupp unless he really lost a step. And there were times last year where Cooper Kupp looked like vintage Cooper Kupp, but when it went away, he was irrelevant. If you were starting him, you were losing. He was outside of starting territory by a lot for a long stretch to end the year. But Davante Adams, he looked good still. He put up big fantasy games with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. he switched teams mid-season and was still putting up numbers. So I get it. I don't think it's a bad move. I think it's kind of I think the Rams know what they're doing. They went to the Super Bowl with Jared Goff and they knew he wasn't the guy. And they bring in Matt Stafford, who they knew was the guy. And what do? They win a Super Bowl. So I'm not going to question the Rams. I think it was a good move. Obviously, if Davante Adams, if his health falls off, then okay. Cooper Kupp's health probably already fell off. So they also re-signed Tutu Atwell to a 1-year, $10 million deal. He actually was relevant at times when called upon with injuries and stuff. So that's a nice signing for the team, and he might be a spot start in deeper leagues. They re-signed their tackle Alaric Jackson, 3-year, $57 million deal. They signed center Coleman Shelton, 2-year, $12 million deal. And then moving on to the 49ers, man, they made a lot of changes. But in terms of who they're bringing in, they signed Mac Jones to a 2-year, $7 million deal to be the backup. Patrick Taylor at running back is back. So Elijah Mitchell is gone, so it's going to be Jordan Mason behind Christian McCaffrey. And we hope McCaffrey stays healthy for my dynasty team's sake. I know, my dynasty team has everyone good. Isn't that crazy? And I still won the championship with McCaffrey, with Tyreek Hill, with Chris Godwin going down, with trading George Kittle away for Kyle Pitts a year or two ago. And I gave up a first. I did all that and I still won. That's how good my team is. I must have traded for Derrick Henry on the cheap because everyone thought he was old and washed. Okay. Yeah, there we go. I don't make all bad decisions. But DeMarcus Robinson signed a 2-year deal, $9.5 billion. He had some good games with the Rams at times, so that's a good depth piece there. But with Deebo Samuel gone, with Brandon Ayuk coming off the ACL injury, and there's been rumors of him leaving. Like this receiver room, it's going to be Jawan Jennings, shout out my dynasty team, and Ricky Pearsall. You know, if Ayuk stays, he's going to have to play better than he did last year. That's for sure. George Kittle at tight end I think he's going to have a monster year. I think he's going to be utilized, and I think with Deebo gone, those short area targets for McCaffrey, if he can stay healthy, whew, that could be nasty. And then our last team of the free agency recap, we got Sam Darnold signing with the Seahawks, a 3-year, $100.5 million deal, $55 million guaranteed, $37.5 million in year one. You know, it's an interesting move by the Seahawks. He's younger than Geno Smith. The thing with Darnold is he has been a starter and he has looked bad. Okay. And then with the Vikings, I know the Vikings weren't expected to come in and have the year that they had, but a lot of that was because we had a rookie and we had Sam Darnold as the quarterback room. Okay. Once Sam Darnold proved that he was capable, the team around him was pretty solid and the defense played better than I think a lot of people expected. So in the end, the team overachieved and Sam Darnold was in a pretty perfect situation with weapons around him, with Kevin O'Connell as a great offensive head coach where he was able to thrive. But if you watch the games, yes, Sam Darnold played amazing most of the time. There were times where it was like, bro, we can't move the ball. Just occasionally, I remember that Jacksonville game in particular. It was like, dude, we're playing Jacksonville. We're going to lose. They're going to score 10 points and beat us. And then obviously at the end of the season, those 2 games to end the year in the regular season and playoffs, he just imploded. So what's the truth about Sam Darnold? I don't know. I'm not going to act like I know. I think he's a guy where if the situation around him is good, he can produce, sort of like Jared Goff. Like Jared Goff isn't going to elevate a team on his own, I don't think, but with a good system around him, like he had in LA with the Rams, or were they St. Louis back then? Whatever it was, like he had with the Rams, or like Sam Darnold had with the Vikings last year. I think these guys are competent enough where they can deliver the ball where they need to, and they can be all right. But going to Seattle, we'll see how that situation pans out. He's got good receivers. He's got JSN and newly acquired Cooper Kupp at wide receiver. I'm not sure what to make of their defense. And, you know, they want to establish the running game in Seattle. So we'll see how it works. But he's going to have weapons. And, you know, if JSN and Cooper Kupp are going to be relevant for fantasy, or if they're going to hit on their ADP, I should say, because they'll be relevant. But Sam Darnold is going to have to play well. So I hope he does. I'm really happy that we got that year out of him. And I was hoping we could bring him back at least on a 1-year deal and, you know, have him and JJ kind of figure out what to do from there. But yeah, McCarthy is the future of the Vikings, it looks like. And damn, Darnold's going to get a shot to resurrect his career, which he very well might. Remember, he started with the Jets. So, you know, we saw Baker Mayfield, you know, leave the Browns and resurrect his career. A lot of that was it Baker's fault, or was it the fact he played for the Browns? So I'm rooting for Sam Darnold. I'm hoping it works out for him. You got Cooper Kupp agreeing to a 3-year, $45 million deal. You know, the Rams, they didn't want him anymore, which is, to me, that's a telltale sign, especially when it's coming from Sean McVay and the Rams. There's some teams where they just make bad decisions and no one is perfect, but I feel like if there's any coach that's going to make an accurate decision in that regard, it's going to be Sean McVay. So I'm not saying Cooper Kupp is like washed, and maybe he'll have some sort of, you know, PPR relevance, kind of like, you know, Adam Thielen, not to make the obvious comparison there, but the age and the look. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. He got a 3-year deal. So they also signed MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, 1 year, $5.5 million deal. He actually had some big games with the Saints. So, I mean, probably not super relevant, but I have MVS on my dynasty team. I picked him up, and what is he their 3? I mean, it's either him or Jake Bobo. I know that's tough competition, but yeah, MVS might have, you know, a game here or there, maybe throw him in a DraftKings lineup, but they also signed DeMarcus Lawrence, 3-year deal worth up to $42 million. Big Twitter beef with him and Micah Parsons about Dallas and how they're not going to win, so he left. But in terms of, yeah, those are all of the teams that exist in the NFL. Kind of covered everything. I hope I covered everything accurately. Monitor the news because more people are going to sign after this, and even as I'm recording, maybe something happened. But there are currently, you know, other free agents available. The big names: Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, from Cooper Kupp to Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper, 31-year-old receiver. He got traded to the Bills mid-season and he got hurt and it really just didn't work out. So we'll see if he's washed or if it was kind of just a matter of circumstance that he didn't put up production last year. But even before he got traded, he wasn't putting up big numbers. So with the Browns, but he had Deshaun Watson as his quarterback. So it's this chicken or the egg. There's a lot of variables, but he's still on the market. Aaron Rodgers is obviously a big name at quarterback. He's 41 years old, but I don't know. I think he showed enough at times where he could be like a bridge quarterback. And if you're desperate, like the Steelers, you know, they need someone if they don't like re-sign Russ, you know, or like even just going to the Browns and being like, you know, we'll give you a lot of money, come in and, you know, bring fans in. Stephon Diggs, 31 years old. He was pretty relevant for fantasy with the Texans in a crowded receiving room with the offense that was struggling. He did tear his ACL and he's now 31 years old. So we'll see where he goes. Maybe he ends up back in Houston with the Texans just with their wide receiver need. I know they just traded for Christian Kirk, but they could use another body there. Wow, Calais Campbell. He's 39. He's a free agent. Weird. I didn't realize he was that old. That's crazy. Good for him. Jameis Winston is another quarterback out there where, you know, it's going to come with a lot of highs and lows and erratic play, but he could be a backup. He could be back. He might sign. I mean, depends where he goes. I mean, there might be an opportunity for him to start, which is good for fantasy because he airs it out and he turns it over, which leads to him needing to air it out more. Russell Wilson is another big quarterback, you know, available. I don't know if he'll re-sign with the Steelers or go elsewhere, but he's 36. J.K. Dobbins, he was a comeback player of the year finalist, not the official comeback player of the year, but he was a finalist and he looked pretty good at times. He had some big runs last year. And he's another year removed from his Achilles injury and all his other injuries. So he might sign somewhere and be part of a committee and be relevant. Elijah Moore is still out there. He's somehow only 25. Weird. Seems like he should be older. Keenan Allen, age 33. We'll see where he goes. If a wide receiver needs a slot receiver, if a team needs a slot receiver, he might fill that hole. Those are kind of the big names, fantasy relevant names. I mean, Nick Chubb is out there, and he didn't look very good last year. But you know, it was 1 year removed from his pretty bad knee injury, so he's getting older. So I'm sure he'll sign with a team, but running backs, when they fall off quick, and I'm hoping he is more recovered from his injury and has a chance to, you know, have a role on a team. He's 29. That's ancient for a running back, but I'm hoping he signs in a good spot. He'll probably end up going like to the Chargers and making it a gross backfield with Najee Harris or somewhere like that, but we'll see. But yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. It was a long one. My voice hurts, but hopefully we got some good info there. Tried to cover everything, but there's so much news, and this is my first free agency episode I've done of the offseason, so there was a lot to cover. I didn't really do a bit by bit. I kind of just did everything at once, including the trades that happened earlier on. So if I missed anything, comment it down below. Make sure you are following or subscribed wherever you are enjoying the podcast so you can stay tuned for the next one. And I look forward to talking to you guys in the next episode. All right, take care. Peace out. And hope your team drafts good players, unless they're the Packers. All right, peace.